Sounds pretty good. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to try and do a bit of a slideshow here. So give me a second to get the technology sorted. Okay, how's that? There should be a slide that says Shem.
Yep.
Okay, great. Right, well, as a bit of an introduction, the Shem, one of the sons of Noah. This is a bit of a look at the sons of Noah and some of the different peoples who are in the Bible. I was doing a bit of a Bible reading in Genesis and came across Genesis chapter 10, sometimes called the Table of Nations. It lists all these different people, different nations. And I just really thought, well, who are all these people and where do they all fit in with things? So I did a bit of digging around the Bible, a bit of research, and yeah, I'm going to show you what that's come to. So Shem, the nations that gave Israel the most trouble were very often their close relatives. And this is often the same with us as well. The people who give us the most trouble are often the ones closest to us, particularly if we've come to the Lord sort of later in life and people have seen a change in who we are from who we were before to who we are now. And, you know, they know what sort of person you were like in your early life. And they see this change and they're often very suspicious of it and suspicious of the church as a result. So troubles tend to come from within our own families, from jealousy, from envy, from bitterness, from a feeling that you've been cheated or left out. There was a study in 2014, 89% of homicides, the victim and the killer knew each other. And quite a lot of those were within the same family. And it was the same with the nation of Israel. The people who attacked, raided them, fought against them, and enslaved them were, in the majority, part of the same family tree and mostly descendants of a man named Shem. So we'll start at the start. There was a man named Noah. For some reason, the picture's not coming up. He built an ark to save his family from the flood, and Noah had three sons, Japheth, Shem, and Ham. And after the flood, these three sons and their descendants were at the forefront of rebuilding civilization in the Middle East. So here's a bit of a look at their family tree, starting with Noah. In Genesis 10 and 11, there's this passage which basically lists all these people who begat all these other people and a lot of very complicated Hebrew names. And if you're just reading through it, it's very dry. So it really needs to be kind of taken out and graphed a bit like this to get an idea about what's going on. So rather than listing all the names, I'm just going to show some diagrams and family trees, and hopefully they show up. So if you take a look at all these names and search for them in the rest of your Bible, you'll find a lot of them pop up later. It's the names of cities, the names of people, and eventually nations that play a significant role in the history of Israel. So in particular, I'm going to focus on Shem. I've got other talks on Japheth and Ham that I might go into later. But Shem is the father of the Israelites, among some other people. So the descendants of Shem, collectively called the Shemites, today we often drop the H and just call them Semites. You might have heard that term today referring to Jewish people, Semites. If you hear the term anti-Semitism, it's against the Shemites, against the people of Shem. So in the first generation, we've got Elam, the father of the Persians, Asher, the father of the Assyrians, Arphaxad, who's the father of the line of Abraham and eventually Israel, Lud, the father of the Libyans, and Aram, the father of the Syrians. The word Aram gives us the Aramaic language that is spoken in that area. So following that red line down the middle, we get to a guy named Eber. Eber, if you put an H on the front of that, you get Heber, and the children of him are the Hebrews. We often use the term Hebrews just to mean the Israelites, but the Hebrews actually encompass several other nations as well. If we go a bit further down, we get to Nahor, the father of Terah and Abraham. So going down, we get the Hebrews. And Abraham, you know, quite well known, actually had quite a few more sons that sort of show up later in the book of Genesis. The best known are Ishmael and Isaac. Isaac because he's the father of the nation of Israel, and Ishmael because he's the father of the Arabs. But later in the book of Genesis, in Genesis 25, after Sarah died, Abraham remarried to a woman named Keturah and had another 6 children, who are actually quite significant, and they come up later. In particular, the Midianites, and also we get through Abraham's nephew Lot, the Ammonites and the Moabites, and then through Isaac's line, Esau and the Edomites, and Jacob and the Israelites. So these are all these nations who show up all the time, are uncles, nephews, cousins, close family to the Israelites, and they were all much worse enemies than the Egyptians or the Greeks or the Hittites or the Babylonians ever were. Part of that is because they were all competing for the same bit of land, but there's also a lot of long-standing jealousy and grudges against Israel. Wow, again, my pictures aren't showing up, but anyway, this originally showed a map of the Middle East. If you can just imagine, you've got the Mediterranean Sea in here somewhere and other stuff around there. Anyway, this was overlaying whereabouts these different nations sat in that area. We'll just have to use our imaginations for the moment, and I'll figure out what this is before I do my next PowerPoint. But anyway, it's the entire Middle East region is divided between the children of Shem, almost the entire area, all the deserts, all the nice mountainous areas, the whole lot. If you divide it up, it's all Shemites all the way. And the closer you get to Israel, the closer the relatives are. Like Ammon and Moab were cousins, and Esau and Amalek were his brother, and further out to Elam, who was sort of his uncle. So going into some of the specifics, Ammon and Moab. So Abraham had a couple of brothers, Nahor and Haran, and in Genesis 12:28, Haran dies at quite a young age and leaves behind 3 children, his son Lot and his daughters Milcah and Iscah. Now, Milcah married her uncle Nahor, and Abraham took Lot under his wing, since at the time he didn't have any children. This was before Ishmael and Isaac came along. There was a picture on this one. Anyway, in Genesis 13, verse 5, it says, "And Lot also, which went with Abraham, had flocks and herds and tents. And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together." Lot and Abraham were forced to part ways eventually because the Lord blessed them so much they were incredibly wealthy. They had huge flocks, and it was just taking over the whole land. So they decided to divide the land, and Lot took the first pick and chose the plain of Jordan, which at the time it says was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. It says, "Even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar." If you look at it now, just imagine that's a picture of the Dead Sea, as the name suggests, pretty dead, pretty bad, and very barren. So hang on. I really have to get these slides working. Oh dear. It was working in practice, I'm sure. Okay. I know what I've done wrong. All right, there we go. Okay, so this is the land of the Dead Sea, which Lot decided to take. All that area on the right-hand side now, which looks very dead and barren, apparently used to be very fruitful and bountiful, which is the area that Lot took. When those cities in the plains were overthrown, Lot managed to escape with his life and with his 2 daughters, but his possessions and his flocks were all consumed with the destruction of the city. Abraham, on the other hand, was not affected by the overthrow. So you get this situation where Lot is completely dispossessed of all his vast riches. Meanwhile, Abraham escapes totally unscathed. In Genesis 19:31, it says, so Lot managed to escape with his 2 daughters. And it's talking about his daughters here. It says, and the firstborn said unto the younger, our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come unto us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. So having seen this volcanic cataclysm befall the cities of the plain, Lot's daughters think that their father is the last man on earth. And I suppose seeing that sort of destruction, you might be well justified in thinking that. So in an attempt to solve that, I suppose, Ammon and Moab are born. And they're shown on this map here in red and blue. So in the years that follow, the Ammonites and the Moabites keep their agreement with Abraham and continue to settle this slightly more desolate land east of Jordan, Ammon in the north and Moab in the south. And in fact, the Ammonites, the city of the Ammonites still exists there today. Amman, the capital of Jordan, is named after the ancient Ammonites. And years later, particularly well-known Moabitess, Ruth, in the book of Ruth, was one of the ancestors of King David. So at the start, Israel, Ammon, and Moab lived quite well together in peace. And when the Israelites took their exodus from Egypt to come into Canaan, the Lord commanded them to leave the Ammonites alone. Deuteronomy 2:19 says, when thou comest nigh over against the children of Ammon, distress them not, nor meddle with them, for I will not give thee of the land of the children of Ammon any possession, because I have given it unto the children of Lot for a possession. But the Ammonites and Moabites didn't really return the favor. In Numbers 22:1-6, it says, the children of Israel set forward and pitched in the plains of Moab. So when they were coming from Egypt, let me see if I can get this laser pointer working. From Egypt, they sort of come around this way and settled up here on the other side of Jordan before moving into Canaan. So you've got a couple of million people in the Israelite Exodus, just sort of sitting there in the plains and sort of using up all the water and taking over all the land and feeding their cattle on the good grass and that sort of things. And it says in Numbers 22:3, Moab was sore afraid of the people because they were many, and Moab was distressed because of the children of Israel. He sent messengers, therefore, unto Balaam the son of Beor, and he said, come now, therefore, I pray thee, curse me this people, for they are too mighty for me. Peradventure I shall prevail that we may smite them, and that I may drive them out of the land. So the Lord ended up basically pronouncing a feud between Israel and the children of Lot. In the next book, in Deuteronomy 23:3, it says, an Ammonite or a Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord, even to their 10th generation shall they not enter into the congregation of the Lord forever. Thou shalt not seek their peace nor their prosperity all thy days forever. So things had been going well between Israel, Ammon, and Moab until, they decided to bring up this man to curse them. And then things got really, really prickly after that. The Ammonites and the Moabites in the years after mounted raids against Israel from then until well after the time of King David. It finally comes to a head in 2 Chronicles 20:1. It says, it came to pass after this also that the children of Moab and the children of Ammon, and with them others beside the Ammonites, came against Jehoshaphat to battle. And they rose early in the morning and went forth into the wilderness of Tekoa. As they went forth, Jehoshaphat stood and said, hear me, O Judah, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, believe in the Lord your God, so shall ye be established. Believe in his prophets, so shall you prosper. And when he had consulted with the people, he appointed singers unto the Lord, that they should praise the beauty of holiness, as they went out before the army, and to say, praise the Lord, for his mercy endureth forever. And when they began to sing and to praise the Lord, the Lord sent ambushments against the children of Ammon, Moab, and Mount Seir, which were come against Judah, and they were smitten. For the children of Ammon and Moab stood up against the inhabitants of Mount Seir, utterly to slay and destroy them. And when they had made an end of the inhabitants of Seir, everyone helped to destroy another. So Judah, under King Jehoshaphat, is attacked by a confederacy consisting of Ammon and Moab, and this other group called the inhabitants of Mount Seir, which is another name for the children of Esau, the Edomites. So all very close relatives of Israel. They're cousins and brothers. But in the end, the Lord helped to overthrow them, the entire combined army, without Israel having to lift a finger at all, and without having to shed the blood of their close relatives. And we find that that's actually a common theme. Whenever these relatives of Israel come against them, the Lord defeats them without Israel having to lift a finger. So the next lot of people are Midian and the children of the east. So Abraham had Ishmael, his eldest son, by Hagar, and then his second son, Isaac, by Sarah. But something we often overlook is that after Sarah died, Abraham took another wife and continued to have children. So in Genesis 25, verse 1 and 2, it says, Then Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah, and she bare him Zimran, and Jokshan, and Medan, and Midian, and Ishbak, and Shua. Most of these guys don't get much of a look in, but Midian does. Genesis 25, verse 5, it says, And Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac, but unto the sons of the concubines, which were these other chaps, which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son, while he yet lived, eastward unto the east country. So God had promised Abraham a son, which was Isaac, and had promised to bless the lineage of Isaac specifically. So he was favored above all the rest of them, and Isaac knew that. So Abraham knew that. So as a result, all the other children were packed up and sent back to Abraham's home country, which is all the way in Samaria, in the city of over this way. So the Abraham's children, they were sent eastward, so they were the children of the east. And all of Abraham's wealth and inheritance goes to Isaac, while the rest of his children are, given a nominal sum, but kind of shunned and sent away. So that's absolutely a recipe for resentment towards Isaac. You've got quite a few sons who think they are owed some inheritance from all the riches that Isaac inherits from Abraham. So it eventually comes to a head about 450 to 500 years later. Soon after Israel enters Canaan, the Midianites have been stewing on this the whole time. And now that Israel have finally inherited the promised land that they came back to after being in Egypt for a while, these guys come from the east to claim a part of what they believe is rightfully theirs. In Judges 6, verse 3, it says, And so it was when Israel had sown, that the Midianites came up, and the Amalekites, and the children of the east, which were these people, the children who had been sent east, and even they came up against them, and they encamped against them and destroyed the increase of the earth, till thou come unto Gaza, and left no sustenance for Israel, neither sheep nor ox nor ass. For they came up with their cattle and their tents, and they came up as grasshoppers for multitude. For both they and their camels were without number, and they entered into the land to destroy it. And Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites, and the children of Israel cried unto the Lord. So the Lord, as a result of this, raises up Gideon to drive out the Midianites. In Judges 7, verse 19, it goes on with the Lord blessing Gideon's tiny army. Verse 19 says, So Gideon and the 100 men that were with him came unto the outside of the camp in the beginning of the middle watch. And they had but newly set the watch, and they blew the trumpets and brake the pitchers that were in their hands. And the 3 companies blew the trumpets and brake the pitchers, and held the lamps in their left hands, and the trumpets in their right hands to blow withal. And they cried, The sword of the Lord and of Gideon. And they stood every man in his place round about the camp. And all the host ran and cried and fled. And the 300 blew the trumpets, and the Lord set every man's sword against his fellow, even throughout all the host, and the host fled. Then further down in Judges 8:28, it says, Thus was Midian subdued before the children of Israel, so that they lifted up their heads no more. And the country was in quietness 40 years in the days of Gideon. So once again, Israel, when faced with a nation of their relatives, the Lord gives them the victory without them needing to lift a finger to do the fight. They stand, they praise the Lord, and the Lord destroys the enemy for them. Right, the Edomites and the Amalekites. So these are the sons of Esau. Esau being Jacob's brother, one of the other sons of Isaac. Esau is also known as Edom, and one of his grandsons' names is Amalek, from which we get the Amalekites. Now, the rivalry between Esau and Jacob is one of the most bitter and enduring struggles of all history, and it goes all the way back to Genesis. So Genesis 25:29 says, "And Jacob sod pottage, or cooked pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. And Esau said to Jacob, Feed me, I pray thee, with some of that red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore his name was called Edom." So Edom, which is the same name as Adam, means red, and it's in reference to the red stew that he ate. So, he has this one incident where he's like, I really like red stew, and then just everyone calls him red for the rest of his life. Really stuck. Down in verse 31, Jacob said, Sell me this day thy birthright. And Esau said, Behold, I am at the point to die, and what profit shall this birthright do to me? And Jacob said, Swear to me this day. And he sware unto him, and he sold his birthright unto Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up, and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So Esau might not have thought much of that at the time, but Jacob holds him to his promise. And when it comes time for Isaac to give Esau the blessing, that's his birthright, Jacob comes in, fools his father, and gets the blessing instead. And in Genesis 27:34, it says, When Esau heard the words of his father, that he'd given the birthright to Jacob, he cried with a great and exceeding bitter cry, and said unto his father, Bless me, even me also, O my father. And he said, Thy brother came with subtlety, and hath taken away thy blessing. And he said, Is he not rightly called Jacob, which literally means heel catcher or supplanter? For he hath supplanted me these 2 times. For he took away my birthright, and behold, now he hath taken away my blessing. And he said, Hast thou not reserved a blessing for me? And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. So Jacob, or Israel, took away everything from Esau. Esau held on to that grudge and passed that story down for generations through all his children, so that they would always know that when they looked at Israel and saw their riches and their success, they would know that that should have been theirs. And once again, like the Ammonites, the Moabites, and the Midianites, Esau feels jilted because he believes that Jacob or Israel has taken what should rightfully have been his. So those events probably happened around 1900 BC. More than 1,300 years later, in 587 BC, when Jerusalem is being sacked by the Babylonians, the Edomites come in to take their revenge on the Israelites. Now, 1,300 years is an awfully long time to hold on to a grudge. I had a bit of a look in some British Anglo history of the sort of events that happened 1,300 years ago to get a sense of it. In 616 AD, a guy named Ethelfrith of Northumbria defeated the Welsh in a battle at Chester in England. So I don't know if there's anyone here who's of Welsh descent who is still angry at Ethelfrith about this. Has anyone even heard of Ethelfrith? Personally, I hadn't before reading up on this talk, but that's the kind of time period. It's such ancient history that everyone around them has forgotten about these events, except for the Edomites, who've just hung on to it as this long ancestral memory, holding such a grudge. So in Psalm 137, it's the one that starts off with, By the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. Later in that chapter, it says, Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it even to the foundation thereof. The day that Jerusalem was taken, the Edomites were there to say, to cheer on the Babylonians and say, just get rid of the whole thing. Get rid of every last memory of Israel. According to another account in the apocryphal book of Esdras, the Edomites were actually responsible for burning down Solomon's temple. When the Babylonians were there sacking Jerusalem, the Edomites, first one through the gate to burn down the temple. Just such long and enduring hatred. The book of Obadiah, it's a small book, 1 chapter, 21 verses. The whole thing is a prophecy against the Edomites, recounting their actions during the fall of Jerusalem. In Obadiah verse 10, it says, "For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. In the day that thou stoodest on the other side, in the day that the strangers carried away captive his forces, and foreigners entered into his gates, and cast lots upon Jerusalem, even thou wast as one of them. But thou shouldst not have looked on the day of thy brother in the day that he became a stranger. Neither shouldst thou have rejoiced over the children of Judah in the day of their destruction, neither shouldst thou have spoken proudly in the day of their distress." Here you've got Esau, a brother nation to Israel, looking at them and cheering at their destruction. I don't know what the equivalent might be here. Maybe if say, Canada was burned down, then I don't know if all the Americans here would be cheering at its destruction. But it's a nation that's practically the same people, speak the same language, have very similar cultures. You shouldn't be celebrating their destruction like that. Verse 13, "Thou shouldst not have entered into the gate of my people in the day of their calamity. Yea, thou shouldst not have looked on their affliction in the day of the calamity, nor have laid hands on their substance in the day of their calamity. Neither shouldst thou have stood in the crossway to cut off those of his that did escape. Neither shouldst thou have delivered up those of his that did remain in the day of distress." So the time when the Babylonians were conquering the whole world, and Edom was next on the list. Once the Babylonians had gone through Israel, Edom was the next bit that they'd conquer. But in spite of that, they're both on this kind of sinking ship, and Edom is there, Esau is there, stopping the refugees from escaping Jerusalem to make sure the Babylonians get them all, and looting the houses that the Israelites have just vacated, and helping to burn down the city and doing all of this. It's like he's saying, even if I die next, at least I know Jerusalem was being sacked and destroyed. And it even continues after that. So this is a painting of Esther accusing Haman of what he did. So the villain in the story of Esther was Haman. It says Haman the Agagite. Agag was one of the Amalekite kings. So the term Agagite, it's a bit of a tricky word to get your mouth around. It's another name for an Amalekite or an Edomite. So even in captivity, there's nothing left for the Edomites. There's nothing left for the Jews. But even there, the last Edomite is trying to kill the last remaining Jews by getting the Babylonians to wipe them out. And even further on than that, at the time of Jesus' birth, the ruler of the land of Israel was King Herod. King Herod, it says, is an Idumean. Idumean is just another name for an Edomite. And he, of course, famously made an order to kill all the Jewish children under the age of 2 in Bethlehem and the surrounding areas. Again, just further down the line, there is no nation of Edom anymore. There is no nation of Israel anymore. It's all Rome. But even within that, they're still trying to kill the last of them. So getting towards the end now, the last couple of countries, Elam, Ashur, and Aram. So Aram, the Syrians were a bit of a problem for Israel around the time of King David. And during his campaigns, he managed to push them right back and put them to tribute. In 2 Kings 6, 24 to 29, the Syrians lay siege to the Israelite city of Samaria. And I think that's the incident where Elijah gets them all blinded and leads them into the city and gets rid of them all. Towards the end of the Old Testament, the nation of Israel was divided into 2 parts, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. And the Assyrians, the sons of Ashur, another one of the Semites, the Assyrians came and conquered Israel and took them away in slavery. And here we have a carving, an Assyrian carving of Assyrians leading the Jews away into captivity. The Elamites and the Persians were actually pretty good guys overall. Judah had been taken captivity into Babylon, and then Babylon was subsequently overtaken by Persia. And the Persian king Xerxes allowed the Jews to return to their homeland and rebuild Jerusalem and the temple. But since then, things have sort of soured with Persia, or Iran as it's known now. They're not terribly fond of Israel anymore, or America either, for that matter. So, in conclusion, the nations that gave Israel the most trouble were all their closest relatives. They were jealous of the good fortunes that Israel had. They were jealous of the blessings that they'd received from the Lord, and believed that they'd been cheated out of a life of prosperity. But was that really the case? They all really had the same opportunities in the same land. Lot, the father of Ammon and Moab, chose the land around the plain of Jordan because it looked good. Didn't consider the sinful nature of the people in those cities would bring down the wrath of God upon them. The Midianites were given gifts and an inheritance from Abraham, but they were jealous of the promise that God had given to Isaac. Esau despised his birthright. He didn't value the gift that God had given him, while Jacob did value it. And as a result, Esau's desire for the immediate gratification of food, of the things of the world, cheated him out of that promise, while Jacob looked forward for a greater reward that was to come. So in all of those cases, the people took the thing that seemed profitable at the moment without looking ahead to the future. So unlike them, we really must value our future salvation above the treasures of the world. And I'd like to leave that there.